champion. So make we roll with him, because we powerful together, the BNP strong. You know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding. We're full of passion and purpose, ready to build the nation with a nervous. You know it's coding, the man who put the people first, the people's champion. So make we roll with him, because we powerful together, the BNP strong. You know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding. We're full of passion and purpose, ready to build the nation with a nervous. You know it's coding, the man who put the people first, the people's champion. So make we roll with him, because we powerful together, the BNP strong. You know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding. We're full of passion and purpose, ready to build the nation with a nervous. You know it's coding, the man who put the people first, the people's champion. So make we roll with him, because we powerful together, the BNP strong. You know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding, you know it's coding. You know it's coding.
Greetings, Jamaica. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us for our second episode of Sunday Reasonings, where we talk some tough topics on an easy, breezy Sunday afternoon. Well, it's breezy again today, luckily. I hope it's easy and breezy wherever you are. So I am Rasheen Robinson. I am the Junior Shadow Cabinet Representative on Education and Training, and I am so happy to be here with three lovely gentlemen this afternoon. I'm surrounded by some awesome men of the party. We, of course, have our President of the People's National Party, Leader of the Opposition and MP, Mr. Mark Golding. Thank you so much for having us again.
Hi, Rasheen.
I'm excited to get into it soon. We also have our MP here. This is Julian Robinson, MP and Shadow Minister of Finance. And we also have MP Fitz Jackson, who is our MP for St. Catherine Southern or South St. Catherine. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to get into it in a few moments. I would be remiss though, and please allow me, if I did not pause, Mr. Golding, to really just offer thanks to you and your team on behalf of Jamaica, for the work that I really feel you and the team did in trying to get successfully getting some of our students safely out of Ukraine. I really also want to mention too the work being done to respond to the mental health issues that may arise and are likely to arise out of such a traumatic experience. I really want to pause here to say thank you and to big you up for that kind of quick response.
I tell you, it was a situation where speed really made a difference. And it was just for, God blessed us with that, and we were able to respond very quickly and get the funding to them almost immediately. And through a fortuitous arrangement, a banking arrangement between one of the students and myself, where our accounts were at the same bank, so the transfer could go through immediately. And they were able to draw on those funds and get out of Kharkiv, which was, eastern Ukraine. It's been severely attacked, and they were able to get out by train and get to Lviv. So that I'm, very grateful that was possible.
Awesome. We really appreciate it, and we're happy. We'll continue to wish them well. We continue to pray for their safety. And we know that their journey continues in different ways, but we're here for them. So thank you. So today, though, as we reason on a Sunday, we're talking cost of living. And we thank you for joining us live on Facebook and YouTube. We're reminding you to use the hashtags Sunday Reasoning and cost of living so that you can join in the dialogue, whether it's even on Twitter and Instagram. We can just find you, send your questions, your comments, so that you can be a part of the engagement here and we can respond to some of the questions and comments that you may pose. Right? So, gentlemen, we are in March. We are at the third month of the year, and things continue to go up, right? Transportation costs, food costs, electricity, and the list goes on and on. What really is happening? What is cost of living, and can we afford it? Can we afford, all these increasing costs? So we're going to be talking about that today. So let's reason now, shall we? All right, we're going to kick this off with talking a little bit about bank fees, right? And I think that has been a hot topic over the last few weeks, and we're just going to get everybody up to speed. Just in case you missed it, I want you to just take a quick look at this clip we have here for you.
The government today used its majority in the House of Representatives to crush changes to the Banking Services Act.
I respectfully and humbly suggest to the member that you withdraw the bill.
When we drafted the bill, Mr. Speaker, we subsequently made adjustments in the bill to concur with some of the provisions in the existing regulations that we had no difficulty with. So, Mr. Speaker, I humbly submit that the bill be read a second time.
Those in favor? Those against?
So in the end, there were 30 no's and 29 yeses. And of course, government members voted that the bill not to be read a second time, but opposition members wanted it to be read a second time. No's outweighed the yeses. The bill was not read a second time, and because of that, it was squashed. Mr. Jackson subsequently indicated that he will be retabling the bill, and he is hoping that at least one member of the government would support his quest to have the changes to the Banking Services Act.
The bill in question has been retabled by me in Parliament last year, October, after the general elections, and it was kept on the order paper since its defeat in 2018. And I must underscore the point that though the provisions of the bill was on a bipartisan basis, after having widespread consultation in the Parliament, Minister Shaw signed the report with those recommendations. Minister Samuda signed the report with those recommendations. Minister Vaz signed the report with those recommendations. They signed to say government act on these, put them in action. But when it came to voting, to make what they said ought to happen, they abandoned the people and they surrendered to the interests of the banks.
All right, you heard that. So MP Jackson, we see that the government in 2018 used this majority vote to vote down the changes to the Banking Services Act. You heard there, 30 to 29. Has anything changed really? And I ask only because we see where both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance suddenly are on the side of the customers, right? Okay. But has anything really changed?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for our party leader to have extended the invitation for me to share with you. To answer the question that you asked, what has changed? A few things have changed, but not for the better. What has changed is that the government majority has increased significantly following the 2020 election. You know, of a 49 to 14 Parliament as against 32.
31 originally.
31. 32, 20, 31 at the time. So it's significantly different. What has also changed is that the malady, the injustice, the unfairness that prevailed then, that the bill sought to correct, have gotten worse. The level of fees have increased and the range of fees have increased. And it's ironic you mentioned in your opening remarks about the students and of course the hardships of our families and by extension our students. Parents look after children in school. The banking fees erode their purchasing power, make it more difficult for them to deal with the day-to-day challenges of life, putting food on the table, paying utility bill, paying lunch money to the children, saving to pay tuition, etc., etc., and the list goes on. So it has changed, but unfortunately for the worse.
Yeah. Let's take a quick look, if we still can, at that clip where the PM was speaking at the Jamaica Stock Exchange event.
Up first this evening, the government is taking the banking industry to task after this week's announcement of increases to some bank fees. Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke commented on the issue at the Jamaica Stock Exchange's 17th Regional Investments and Capital Markets Conference. Now our business reporter Javon Keys has been monitoring the conference.
Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, banking as we know it has changed. Customers have been forced to do less transactions in branch and engage more with the online platforms and automated banking machines. This has now come at a higher cost, with both the National Commercial Bank and Scotiabank announcing increases in banking fees. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke expressed dissatisfaction with the bank's decision.
When it comes to the setting of bank fees, it would seem as if our commercial banks are tone deaf.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness also had an issue.
Children are now going back to school, so fees are now coming back in. Bus fares and lunch money have to be paid. And then they have to now hear about increases in bank fees. I am not here appealing to your conscience. It makes good business sense. One.
All right, so here we heard all the care and compassion just now.
It is so disingenuous, so disingenuous. And I ask, when you listen to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Justice, you wonder if they were sleeping on a rock. I never knew all along that these fees were being charged. But the fact of the matter, they knew, because they voted against it, deliberately, consciously. And the truth be told, it's like slavery. It was an economic arrangement for which they were beneficiaries and they were sufferers. It's a plain economic arrangement.
Yeah.
There are persons who benefit enormously from these fees. The owners of the banks. They make over $50 billion from fees alone. From fees alone. Cumulatively. The Bank of Jamaica report is there to confirm it.
That's per annum.
Per annum.
Per year.
Over $50 billion per year they make from fees. Plus, of course, what they make from interest income, which is what they're there for.
Yeah.
And I want to interject. I want the banks to be successful. I want the banks to make profit because we need banks in any modern society. But what they have done is to change the order to replace easy money from the high interest rate regime in the past to make easy money, which is risk-free. Because from the fee income from the fees, there's no risk. Because all they do is skim off a little of each account every month. Take no risk. Banks need to mobilize funds, lend it to business people, lend it to individuals that they can invest, let the economy grow and make everybody make money. Not be a viper and take away what people already earned, what people already sacrificed for, and they make nothing from it. Banks must give service as an incentive for people to make deposits. It is from the deposits that they make money. Banks, unlike any other business, they make money from other people's money. Other businesses have to invest. They have to borrow money, save their own money, invest it in capital, invest it in office building, technology, personnel, all of that. They have to take the risk. Banks given a special privilege by the government to take deposits and use it. No other institution has that privilege. Take the deposits and use it, people, for giving them the opportunity to make money. That is what is immorally wrong, bad, wicked, cruel, sinful, that need to be corrected. And I wonder how these gentlemen in the government side sleep at night.
Well, it's just interesting that they have had an about turn on this thing, you know. I mean, Fitz had the foresight and determination to get this bill drafted and tabled and fought hard for it to be debated. The government shot it down using their majority. The bill essentially would allow banking consumers to have a certain number of transactions without charge per month. That was one of the main items of the thing. It was a collection of basic services for which fees wouldn't be charged. And the truth is that the fees, especially the fees that are a fixed sum of money, represent a much bigger portion of the deposits of smaller savers than they do of more wealthy people. So it's another kind of regressive situation where it hurts the little man more than the big man as well. And I agree with him that we need to do something about this. And the fact is that the pressure from the bill and the publicity around it has put the banks on the spot. And maybe they are adjusting. And I hear some of them are trying to do certain things, which we commend them for. But I think the law should provide this package of protection for the public, and the banks will comply with that. They make money from lending. They make money from foreign exchange trading. They make money from trade financing. There's no reason why fee income has to be a huge portion of their bottom line, especially if it's fee income derived from people's basic savings or basic transactions that they have to do to get by in life. So it's tabled again.
Yes,
Fitz has retabled it, and we're hoping that now that the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance seem to be on board, that they'll support it this time.
Well, Prime Minister, the party leader won't say it himself, but I give him credit, because in 2017, thereabout, after the first draft, I consulted with him as a banker himself. So he went through the bill clause by clause with me because I wanted to get the perspective from a banker.
Someone in the right.
From a banker. He granted me that privilege. We sat down together and went through it clause by clause to ensure that ethically, from a banking standpoint, everything was in order. So I want to use the opportunity to thank him because he was the Minister of Justice at the time. So I utilized his legal competencies at the time. And he didn't send me an invoice.
They never bill you. So let's talk a little bit about some of the proposed amendments then, right? What will that mean on the ground for some of us and our accounts? What will it look like?
As intimated by the party leader, all the bill does is to provide for a minimum service package.
Okay.
To say, given that person's banks get the benefit of using people's deposits, whether in a checking account, savings account, any deposit, they must be given a minimum level of benefits for placing deposits. And those include be able to make withdrawal from your own account without any
being charged.
Be able to make deposits into your account without any charge. Some banks are charging $1,000 to make a deposit and $1,000 for a withdrawal. It's to make inquiry, because the passbook days are done. They're not giving you a passbook and going and updating, and you can account and see all the transactions again to account. So if you make inquiries into your account, there's no charge. It makes provision, for example, you can't unilaterally change fees and so forth without the depositor being aware of what the provisions are. It makes provision that there's no special fee for any day of the week. There are banks that there's a special fee for transaction on a Saturday. Really? The depositor never knock on the door and take them out in bed to open their bank. They open their banks on a Saturday and they charge them an extra fee for making the transaction on that day. Saturday. It makes provision, for example, if you have a minimum balance account, right? If the depositor should breach the account once, the arrangement, you don't have a repetitive reduction. So, for example, someone that have a $5,000 minimum balance, and by chance or deliberately, you go $1 below. Some of them charge $500 every month that it remains under. So after 10 months, all of that is gone.
Wow.
And the banks benefit, and you would have lost everything.
Yes.
It is provisions like those to protect the depositors. And I must underscore, not to take anything from the bank.
Yeah.
Because these are the depositors' money. That bill before the parliament has nothing to do, for example, with loan processing fees. Anything to deal with the bank's money, the bill doesn't enter into the reference at all.
We're talking some
day-to-day
depositors'
money that they have and the transactions.
It's on the deposit side, it's on the customer side.
On the customer.
I was shocked even transferring money online, you're charged for that. I mean,
yes.
Well, I'll give you a recent example.
It's crazy.
Very recent. In preparing my Integrity Commission report, which we have to do by the end of the month, I had to go more than a year behind. So my online banking platform didn't allow me. So I had to request a statement from the bank.
You have to pay for that request.
Not just, I had to pay for a search fee. I told them the exact date of the date and the month of the statement. I paid for a search fee, and then I had to pay for a print fee. Wow. And the only reason I inquired, I couldn't do it online. And it was something like $3,500.
Yeah, wow.
It's crazy. That's just too much. Wow. That's madness.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, I just repeat, I can't comprehend why these guys, how they sleep at nights.
I would just add this, if it's with what we're going into now, with the cost of living crisis, which has come out of the pandemic, we've already had high inflation, and the situation in Ukraine is going to make it worse in relation to some basic things like wheat and other food items that come from that, as well as agricultural chemicals for farmers, and of course oil and gas. So it is all the more important that the consumer gets the protection of your bill now. And I'm hoping that once the budget is concluded, that legislation will be fast-tracked and passed into law, so that the consumers can benefit from it at a time when they're going through their worst possible nightmare of high prices everywhere.
And I want to make up, this is not a PNP or GLP issue. And in that regard, I'll make the point. When the motion started in 2013 was tabled, in the motion, it made provision for it to be referred to the Economy and Production Committee that was chaired by the opposition then, who is now the government members.
Right.
And it was deliberate to make sure that there was cross-party collaboration. And I said it, as was pointed out in the clip, the report was under the chairmanship of Mr. Samuda. It was Mr. Samuda who said to the report to say, do these things in protection of the depositors. And for that reason, I just call upon these gentlemen and ladies, let some reasonableness prevail.
Yeah.
Let good sense prevail and give our fellow Jamaicans a break, particularly since we are at our 60th anniversary.
Absolutely.
Say to them that you are prepared to put them in front.
I want to make 2 more points in relation to support for the bank bill. One, we have to be encouraging financial inclusion, particularly for those who are most vulnerable. And it is for reasons like these bank fees why people don't want to open bank accounts.
That's right.
Particularly people who don't have large deposits, because they just feel that the bank will eat out the money. And secondly, in an environment where we're come out of COVID, where you can't really go to the branch, right? Because if you go to the branch, you have to wait a couple hours outside
and then
before you go inside. So people are forced to do transaction online. You can't be charging people the level of fees for online transactions.
Right.
For using internet banking, doing transfers online. Yes, there is a cost to the bank for these things, but there must be an incentive for people to do these transactions online. And you're almost making it a disincentive with the level of fees that you're charging right now.
Yeah. All right, so we want to hear, thank you, gentlemen. We want to hear from you, our viewers. Did you know or were you aware that the fee income has now become 40% of bank revenues? Did you know? Didn't you know? Let us hear your thoughts and your comments. Please drop them in the chat, send them in. Use the hashtag Sunday Reasonings, the cost of living, and let us know your thoughts. We are going to move into talking about this hedge tax.
Okay.
What it is, we have to touch on that, and we're going to break it down for the people too, so we know exactly what it is that we're talking about. So since we're being taxed left, right, and center, right, let's talk about the hedge tax. MP Golding, we've seen you speak about this numerous times. I want you to break it down for our viewers. Break it down for me. I'm not going to pretend that I know the ins and outs of what this thing is. What is the hedge tax? Let's start there and then we'll continue.
Okay. So oil is a commodity, as is gas, natural gas, that we use for generating electricity and for transportation. And the price of it depends on international market conditions, which can be impacted by a whole range of things, from the world economy to geopolitical issues like war and so on. Now, in the international financial markets, it is possible to buy insurance against the price moving in a particular direction. And that insurance is called a hedge. We were at a time in government when the oil price was relatively low, but there was a risk that it could go up over time. And the private sector and others were saying to us, we should really protect
protection.
Protect the economy from future increases in the oil price by buying insurance on the international market in the form of this oil hedge. And in order to pay for that, we said, well, the consumer is going to get the benefit of this over time. May not, you can't really predict where oil prices will go. So you can't say that next year you're necessarily going to benefit. It's like when you insure a car or a house. You don't know which year you may actually make a claim, but it's the prudent thing to do. So we put in place a tax specifically to pay for the hedge. I think it was originally $7 or something per liter. That's right. And that money went into a specific account within the consolidated fund, and a structure was put in place with advisors and so on to go out and buy the insurance, and the insurance was bought. The then opposition, now government, they said that they didn't believe in this thing, and as soon as they came into office, they discontinued the hedge. When the contracts were coming up for renewal, because they're annual contracts, they didn't renew them. But they didn't remove the tax. They kept the tax. So from then onwards, we have been saying, look, it's not right where you go to the public and you explain why you're doing something, and you're saying this tax is being imposed for this benefit, for your protection. You take away the protection and the benefit, but you
But
keep
you
the
still- you
tax.
still charge
I don't think that's ethical. I don't
Yeah.
think that's good policy.
Mhm.
So we have been calling from then to on the government to remove this tax, and we continue today, especially when oil prices have gone up so high, and the pump prices at the pump, ex-refinery price from Petrojam, motorists are feeling it. The transport operators who are under price controls effectively, their margins have been squeezed. They're balling for a fare increase. Electricity prices are going up and up and up because it's a pass-through of the whatever they pay, and they pay significant taxes to the government on the oil that they buy to run the turbines and run the power plants and so on. So we are saying, look, this is not right. This should have been removed, and we continue to argue for its removal. And there's another point really, which is this: in the coming fiscal year, the budget, which has been tabled by the Minister of Finance, has certain assumptions around which the budget is developed. One of the assumptions is to do with the international price of oil.
Okay.
And they're projecting an average price over the coming year, fiscal year, from April 1 to March 31st next year, of $67.50 per barrel for oil. Now, the reality is that because of what's happened in Ukraine and what was happening from before anyway, prices were, I mean, at the time the Ukraine thing started, it was in the 90s, and it's now gone over $100 per barrel. The taxes on that incremental portion above the $67.50 were not even budgeted for. Those are a windfall to the government. And we're saying, listen, given the pressure that the people are under, give the people a break. Give the motorists a break. Give electricity customers a break. Give transport operators a break. Cap the SCT at the budgeted amount, or at least get rid of that hedge tax and give the consumers a break. And so that is a call that we've been consistently making. Our energy spokesman, Philip Paulwell MP, he has been making it. Our finance spokesman, Julian, has been making it. And I, as leader of the opposition, have been making it.
You're actually echoing a tweet I was about to read. You've been calling and talking about this. Here you say, as chaos reigns in the transport sector, I'm again calling on the government to give motorists a break by removing the tax that was imposed to pay for the oil price hedge. That hedge ended in 2016, but the tax remains despite its justification being abandoned. Remove that tax, people first. And that has been your
I have. I mean, and Damien King responded, for example, Dr. Damien King, an economist, and said, so are you abandoning the fiscal prudence and the debt reduction program? And the answer is no. As I've said, the reality is that because of where oil prices are now, relative to what the budgeted assumptions are, there is a cushion, there's a buffer, and we can safely abandon this tax without really throwing the budget out of whack. And the budget that they've come with in any event is an extremely conservative budget. In difficult times when the people are relying on the state for protection, especially the poor and the vulnerable, they've come with a balanced budget, and a budget which is runs a very big primary surplus, which essentially means that the money that's available to give cushions to the people in terms of how to manage their day-to-day lives and balance people's lives, those are lacking in the budget. So we're saying, look, at least give them this, because this tax was imposed for a specific purpose. That purpose was abandoned in 2016 after you came into office. Take away the tax that was supposed to finance that purpose, and where that purpose has been abandoned. It is just the right thing to do.
So let me get this. Let me just ensure that I understand. If we get this break, then give the people a break, take away that tax. Is it that we're going to see lower prices at the pump, for example?
We would.
Well,
of course, with the price of fuel going up, that is one component of the price at the pump is the actual price of oil. But a big component, over 40% of what you pay for at the pump, is actually in the form of various taxes. So to the extent that we remove some of those taxes, we would be reducing the price that consumers bear. You don't see it because you just buy a price is quoted per litre,
that way,
but it's charged. Most of it is charged by Petrojam to the marketing companies that run the gas stations. The different brands that are out there. That they are the one they pay in the price that they buy the fuel from Petrojam, which is the main importer of oil and producer of petroleum products through the refinery. So yes, it would reduce the cost to consumers.
Well,
another angle to add to the party leaders' clarification about it is synonymous to you taking out an insurance policy for your car, example, and then be told, pay the premium, but there's
no coverage.
Yeah.
So if the car mash up, you on your own, but
yes, but right.
Or your government use the power of the state to extract that.
That's a great analogy. And I mean, you can imagine if you have a mortgage on your house and you have to insure your house. You can imagine you're paying the premium on insurance, but you don't have the cover. That doesn't make any sense. So,
I wanted to just talk about the totality of the taxes. So we have spoken about the hedge, which is about $7 per litre. There are two forms of special consumption taxes. There's a fixed portion, which works out to be about $37 per litre, and then there's a component called the ad valorem. The ad valorem is a variable component, which is 10% of the SET plus the ex-refinery price. So as the price of oil goes up, the government collects more money, right? So the point the party leader was making, having budgeted, developed a budget at $67.50, we are now at over $100. So the government is making significantly more than they budgeted for. So, for example, if you pay $200 per litre for gas, I would say about $65 of the $200 are taxes that go to the government.
Wow. Well,
and we're just saying, look, when you budget at a certain price, and in fact, the price is much higher. Remember, the government is not buying the oil. That is a pass-through to consumers. They are generating revenues from that in the form of these various taxes that Julian was speaking about. Now, we're saying, since you're going to be getting substantial incremental revenue because the price of oil is way above what you were budgeting, share that with the consumer by reducing some of those taxes or capping those taxes so that they don't all flow through and hit everybody hard in their pockets. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, let's put the people first. Huh? So I'm adding a hashtag, remove that tax, right? Yeah. So you mentioned here, as we brace for another hike in transportation costs, right? We that's happening, all right?
We don't know. They announced it, and then
they seem to be walking back. But what I would say on this is, the reality is that the taxmen are going to pressure the government because it's not going to be economical. If 70 to 80% of your costs relate to fuel, and fuel has gone up by 60% over the last year, and you don't have an adjustment, then you're going to pressure the government for that adjustment. But the reality is, the adjustment means every other good and service in the country is going to be affected, because gas and electricity affects every single thing. So when we're asking for a break on gas, it's not just the impact on gas itself, but the impact on everything else in the economy affected by gas. And we are a very import-dependent economy.
I just want to repeat the point that Julian just made about the increases in the cost of petrol, gas at the pump, really at the ex-refinery level, but it's flowed right through to the over a year.
1 year period.
It has gone up by over 60% in a year. I mean, we talk about inflation being 9%. That is on a broad basket of goods, which includes various goods which may not have moved much in price. But on some elements in them, and critical elements, it has been an enormous inflation. And one of those elements is the price of fuel, of gas.
All right. So with the rising transportation costs, we have to face the cost of gas going up, right? We're going to take a look at something you said, MP Robinson, at the PNP press conference. If we could jump to that. That was back in August last year, right, in relation to all of this. So let's take a look at that.
Chicken back, $60 in 2016 is now $140, an increase of 133%. Cooking oil, $85 in 2016 is now $220, an increase of 158%. Tin mackerel has moved from $55 to $100, an increase of 81%. Rice has gone up from $31 per pound to $62 per pound, an increase of 100%. And sugar has gone up from $55 per pound to $121, an increase of 120%. So, Madam Speaker, this is the reality that Jamaican people are facing.
Madam Chair, before I ask the specific question, just a general comment. We are disappointed that the government is spending less at this particular time. While we recognize the reduction in revenues, the inflows into the government, there are particular priorities that we believe must be actioned. Just today, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released an economic research service report which shows that 12.8% of the Jamaican population is what they consider to be food insecure. Those are persons who are not consuming sufficient amount of food per day based on their calculation. This represents 100%.
Yeah, that was, I feel, very important information, and it was quite reminiscent for me of another moment that, you know, you had brought that basket of food. I think you said it was $10,000 worth of food.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would have created an entire social media storm and media storm in general, as people really looked at what $10,000 could have gotten you. But if we think that it was bad then, I mean, where are we now? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Worse. If you look at specific prices of goods, whether it is chicken, whether it is flour, whether it is other meats, we're talking about a range from a low of 20% to 50 and 60% in the last year. Now, I'm talking about before the Russia-Ukraine war.
So we can't use that,
because we haven't seen the effects
of that yet.
Because that's only 2 weeks old. But we're talking about for people who are vulnerable, who use the majority of their income to buy basic food items. It's not the 8 or 9% inflation they're facing. They're facing 40 and 50% inflation. Right? And so the government has to look at how it is going to address how you take care of the most vulnerable. Because we're getting to a point where people simply will not be able to afford to eat. We get into that stage. And as I said, we are before the impact of Ukraine. And when you add Ukraine to it, it may be another 20, 30, 40%. We don't even know. But at this point in time, the increases are significant, the pressures. And remember, you know, not everybody has recovered from COVID.
Indeed.
You have people who still don't get back them work yet. If you think of the entertainment sector and the spin-off and all the other people who benefit, it's 2 years them been out of work. School starting back for the first time face-to-face. The lady you used to sell at the gate, it's 2 years she not get no business in it. So you have to put it in the context of an economy that has not even recovered to pre-pandemic levels, and we're facing increases that we have never seen in modern times. So the government, I'm not going to say they are responsible for it, because there are many factors that contributed to it, but they have a responsibility to respond and to help the most vulnerable.
Right, yes, agreeing.
And therefore is responsible for the consequences that occur for which their poor response would have contributed.
You also spoke about food insecurity, Julian, and we're going to just quickly take a look at a clip that was over a year ago in Parliament. We're going to take a quick look at what you said there.
Madam Chair, before I ask the specific question, just a general comment. We are disappointed that the government is spending less at this particular time. While we recognize the reduction in revenues, the inflows into the government, there are particular priorities that we believe must be actioned. Just today, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released an economic research service report which shows that 12.8% of the Jamaican population is what they consider to be food insecure. Those are persons who are not consuming sufficient amount of food per day based on their calculation.
All right, thanks for that. So what I want to do though is talk about what is our response on the ground on a practical level. So tell us more. How do we respond to this? Is this where backyard farming comes in? What do we do?
Well, I want to say, first, I want to talk a little bit about the government's response in COVID.
Okay.
I mean, the government made a big PR thing about giving everybody $10,000, a one-off $10,000 grant for people who applied for this grant. The reality is the government's expenditure to individuals and businesses was extremely low, the lowest in the Caribbean, right? When you look at the current budget, it's less than half of 1% of GDP in support to persons. And it's important to put that in context, that the people who would have been most vulnerable really got very little help. Capri did a study which looked at the impact of the pandemic, and they estimate that 3/4 of the people most in need got nothing at all in terms of support. So now you come to a situation where people have not recovered fully. They are facing unprecedented prices.
Yeah.
There are things we have to do as a country. We obviously import too many things. We have an import bill of $1 billion US. There are things that we can farm ourselves so that we don't have to import it. But individuals also have to take some decisions, about the things that you eat, whether you do a little backyard farming as well. But the reality is, it is very difficult for the most vulnerable to adjust in a short period of time.
Yeah.
You have to eat. I mean, your children have to eat. We buy things which stretch far. So you buy a little protein chicken back, but you buy plenty rice and flour, because you want to stretch it far with the carbohydrates, which are not absolutely good for your health. But you have to give your kids something to eat. So the reality is people are going to struggle in this environment.
Right.
And it is important in this budget that there is something there as a buffer for the most vulnerable. Something more than what would have existed. Because the $1,000 that you had last year can probably only buy $500 worth of things
now. Right, yeah.
That's the
so
reality
to Sir
that
Jackson's point, the government needs to respond appropriately.
Needs to respond appropriately.
Sir Golding, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, the truth is that it's very difficult for the most vulnerable to respond very quickly, because any response requires you to go and spend some money, whether it be to buy seed to go plant and all of that, and so it's not an easy thing. The government can do more. I think they need to encourage people to become more secure from a food perspective by providing some of the inputs that, like, for example, basic seeds that can be used to grow food, and for people who want to get into the backyard farming thing, or encourage people to expand their own domestic production and what have you. But we also feel that the budget should be more responsive to the needs of people. We feel that this is not the time to be fiscally conservative and driving down the debt as fast as possible. Yes, we want the debt to come down, but we also want people to survive so they can enjoy the benefits of that. And we want a society that's not torn apart by all the stresses that come with the struggle for daily survival.
Yeah.
So we feel the government ought, in the here and now, to be doing more to support people who need help. Increase path benefits, provide more compassionate grants for people, tide them through this difficult time. And also, as I've said, reduce some of the taxes on fuel. That would be a major spin-off for the economy in terms of reduced costs. And there are other things that we can talk about, but these are some of the critical things that we've been talking about. Tablets and devices for students. Why are those taxed? We've been calling for the removal of taxes on those things.
Yeah.
It's, even though we're going back to face-to-face, there's going to be blended learning going forward. And it's all the little children in my constituency, they need their tablet, or if they're in a secondary or tertiary, they need a laptop. And they can't afford it. And taxes are one of the reasons why. So these are things which a compassionate and caring government, a responsive government, a responsible government will be looking to address at a time like this. And we just feel that the government is really just balancing the books, but they're not balancing people's lives. And it's going to weaken the society. It's going to make this progress that we all want to see towards achieving our vision for Jamaica, our 2030 vision, will not be realized, because you cannot realize it unless you invest in the people and make the people's lives better. And that is not happening.
Yeah.
But I also think, that whole struggle and difficulties that our people are experiencing is compounded by a certain amount of callousness that exists in the society. For example, in respect to corruption, when people are struggling to put a meal on the table, and you hear that about those who are politically connected getting millions and millions of dollars of contract without any value being provided to the Jamaican society, it makes people's mental capacity to deal with the day-to-day struggle even more overwhelming.
Yeah.
This is the time when you want all hands on deck. You want the suffering, not so suffering, not so much suffering to come together to solve a Jamaican challenge.
Yeah.
As Julian said, the government did not cause the pandemic. But what we do in the midst of the pandemic can either help to make the situation less terrible and more bearable.
And the pressures are going to be mounting because the situation in the world right now is with what is happening in Ukraine, and because Ukraine and Russia is now under sanctions, which is going to affect their ability to export various things. You know, what is happening there is going to mean everything is going to get harder across the world. And you know, the pressures that I think people were already at the close to breaking point. And I fear what is going to happen unless they feel that the government is really reaching out and doing everything it can to protect them or to make life a little better, a little easier for them. And that is tremendously important at a time like this. So, you know, this is why we are focused on what this budget ought to be doing. Even in the issue of how you deal with the learning loss of the students who have been out of school for 2 years, and so many of them did not have access to learning because they didn't have access to the internet, or they didn't have a device, or whatever it may be, or couldn't afford it. So there's nothing really in the budget to address that. And we've had a commission that looked at this whole question of the education system under Professor Orlando Patterson, and they've recommended that you have to make investments now to protect the society from the effects of this lack of learning going down the road.
Which is, I think, 800 and something billion as opposed to,
I mean, that's how he quantified it.
That's how he quantified it.
He's saying that if you don't make those expenditures now, between 2 and 3 billion a year for 2 years, the cost to the society down the road will be multiples of that. So, but we're not seeing that in the budget.
Right.
So, to me, the government has really missed the boat. They've dropped the ball, and the country is going to suffer for it. So, you know, part of our job as opposition is to point these things out to them so they can correct or improve on their performance. We all want Jamaica to be a better place. We all want Jamaica to have a society where we feel safe, where we feel like we belong, and where we have a future together. So, you know, it's not a question of just opposing for opposing's sake, but we have a responsibility to point out where the government is failing or where it's falling short. And the people expect that of us, and that is what we're doing.
Yeah. The government may respond and say that one of the responsible things, you talk about a responsible government, one of the responses they've made is to increase the minimum wage now. It's increased to $9,000. So you've been calling for $12,000 for a while. What are your thoughts on this? Is this a livable wage?
Well, first of all, in percentage terms, it sounds like a substantial increase.
Right.
You know, I think it's nearly 29%.
28.5, almost 29%.
Call it 29%. Yeah, but remember that it's covering several years of inflation from, I think, 2018 through to 2022. And in the last 12 months to January, the inflation was close to 10% for those 12 months alone. So you're really talking about a situation where that $2,000 added to the $7,000 that was the minimum wage before is not going to give any protection for the coming price increases. It's only trying to address what has gone on already. And of course, it ought to take into account what is to come because it's being set now for years to come. So we don't feel it's adequate. We were calling for, from I think last October I called for it, a minimum wage of $12,000. To my mind, it is important that the minimum wage be set at a level where a single mother earning that wage with children can at least survive and have some dignity in the family and how they live and some hope for the future. If you don't have a minimum wage that achieves that, then yes, the person may have a job, but the truth is that their ability to build a family and create a better future for them and their community and their country is being eroded and undermined. And we feel it's more important to require that basic protection in the labor laws than it is to allow persons to employ people at below what would be a livable wage. So we think this concept of a minimum wage needs to transition to what is a livable wage, something that actually gives you keeps you out of abject poverty. And we felt that $12,000 was a reasonable starting point. And this was a few months back. But even if they were to have pushed it to that now, I think people would feel justified and would feel, yes, that was a very meaningful increase. But I think most people feel that in this day and age, where all the prices have been going up at the percentages that Julian has outlined, where many food items are in the 40 to 50% inflation, and the oil at the pump or at the refinery flowing through to the pump, 60% over a year. $2,000, that can't cut it.
Well, let's take $9,000 for a single mother with 2 kids going to school.
Go ahead.
And she have to take, let's say she take 2 buses to go to school. That's probably about $2,000 a week. She has to send her kids to school on public transportation. She has to give her kids some lunch money or prepare lunch. She has to buy food. She has to pay light bill, water, rent. The $9,000 can't balance. It just cannot.
And what if them get sick?
Right? Not even to mention if there's an emergency. Right? And our society has many of those single mothers with 2 or more kids trying to struggle, trying to fight. So you might say the 7 to 9 is welcome, but it still does not help that lady
and
to earn a decent living and living dignity. It doesn't.
And how you've outlined it there, it's scary to ask the question, what is she supposed to do? When it doesn't balance, what is she supposed to do?
Well, I mean, what happens is they don't eat chicken back every week or every day. They don't eat meat at all, sometimes for weeks on end. I mean, as it's flour with a little gravy with some scallion and onion chop up, and and that's it.
Well, we heard that this week,
I mean, and that was a very graphic example of how many Jamaicans live day to day. So their nutrition is compromised and their hope and spirit is compromised.
How do they learn? I mean, this is a domino thing, because then you have a child now that isn't eating properly or eating well, and then they need to learn and operate at the highest level in school.
And then you remember, all schools start back tomorrow. So the bus fare money gone up, the lunch fare money gone up, and the same salary. Even if you take it at $9,000, it still does not balance, right? And there has to be some mechanism put in place in addressing the minimum wage, that it's not a subjective assessment. You're tied to the cost of living, you're tied to inflation, and you make regular adjustments so that people can
contextualize
keep
it.
Right? So you don't have to go around this island-wide consultation to hear what John and Mary say. No, just look at the numbers. And you can't just look at the total inflation basket, because for the most vulnerable, they experience higher than the overall inflation because they have to buy all the basic food items. They take public transportation. So their inflation is higher than the 10%. Much higher than 10%.
I really want to emphasize that point Julian made about those periodic, and I got to say statutory review or adjustment period. You know what is painful? All of us are members of parliament. We have to deal with people. We look them in their eyes and see their realities and know those realities. We're not talking about statistics. We're talking about real lives that are affected on a day-to-day basis. And it's for that reason, the least we can do is to make sure that those at the bottom, we as a matter of statutory provision, make the necessary adjustments where they can be made. And secondly, I want to suggest, following up on the point that Julian made about going back to school, tomorrow, and the hardships, I think for the first 2 months, as of tomorrow, a careful review must be looked on the attendance level. Because my suspicion is that many parents won't be able to send their children out, even though we are formally declared face-to-face. Because we know with the virtual learning, numerous students were not logging on. And the government was giving itself a pat on the back to say, oh, so many tablets are in school, as if to say that relates to learning. It's not. There's a wide ocean between what they say and what is literally happening with each student. So I believe we need to look in another 2 or 3 months, not longer, what the attendance level is, so we can get a better feel as to how this economic challenge is impacting and children attendance.
Well, I can tell you, I spoke to one of my principals. Actually, we were conversing on WhatsApp, and she has indicated that even with the blended approach, which has existed over the last couple of months, that the attendance has been poor. And she said it is because financially the parents can't afford to send the kids to school. So I don't know what will happen come tomorrow and the weeks going forward when the price increases really fully hit us.
I visited a high school in northern Clarendon in a rural, a strong agricultural area. And I spoke with the principal, and he had indicated to me that there were about 200 to 300 students that they had no idea, they weren't there and they hadn't been coming and they weren't in touch with them. And they had to try to, they were trying to find where they were and what had happened to them. So I mean, these are, they're just at home, but they're not in a position to pursue their education. And we need to address that because that is a crisis that is going to have long, you're talking about long COVID. Well, this is the long learning loss is going to be a serious issue for the Jamaican society in years to come, which is why the Patterson report, Orlando Patterson, said you must make some investments in the near future to mitigate those issues, to resolve those issues, to sort that out. Because if you don't, you're going to be paying a heavy price for it down the road. So the government needs to respond to that. That is a crisis thing, and that is must be a priority in the budget.
All right, let me just read some comments from you, our viewers here, and thank you so much again for being a part of the conversation and for tuning in. We have a comment here from Angela Natty. She says, this government created a monster and is hypocritically trying to rein it in. They keep taking Jamaicans for idiots. Jay Young says, a big thank you to Minister Fitz Jackson for standing up for us, poor people. Hold firm to your point, sir. Truth and justice. Everton S. Jackson says, this is an issue worth continuing to fight for. I hope the people appreciate your fight. And here we have Sir Howell _Greg on Twitter sharing, he has what they call it, tagged the Prime Minister and Fitz Jackson saying, question, when was that bill tabled? And I figure the person is speaking about
the second one or the first one?
I think it's the second bill. When was that bill tabled? Did any of the PNP members vote against or for it, asking for a friend?
All the PNP members of Parliament voted for it.
All right, so there you have that, Sir
All the government members in the Parliament voted against it.
Yeah, you hear that? Every single government member, including those who had signed the report, making the recommendations that were in that legislation, they voted. It was entirely because they did not want Fitz Jackson and the opposition to achieve that landmark piece of legislation. It was nothing to do with the national interest. And he has retabled it again. When he retabled it, Fitz? October?
In October 2020.
2020.
Immediately after the election.
And it's just there in Parliament, I mean, they control the agenda of Parliament. So they can put it on the order paper to be debated. It's entirely within their gift. But we are going to, and we hope the public will be clamoring for it to say, yes, debate that bill, pass that bill, give us a break. Yes, we want a strong financial system. Yes, we want banks to be profitable. It's important that they are because people's deposits are held with them. So they must be strong. But they don't need to extract so much, especially from the smaller depositors. And those depositors need a break. And the Fitz Jackson bill will give them that break. So
my concession in a party, they can take my name off the bill,
Sure. If that's the issue, you can just take my name off it.
Put any one of them name on it. All we want is the provisions for the protection
of the people first.
There you go.
Thank you, Sir Jackson. Paul Lynn from Facebook says, how many Jamaicans are unbanked? It would be interesting to separate this data between rural and urban demographics. I suspect the unbanked numbers are shocking. This is an inequality that must be fixed. Please keep your comments coming and your questions. We are here to answer them. So on top of all of this that we've been talking about, right? I mean, so much going on. There is call for Portmore to become a parish. A push for Portmore. Sir Colin said, oh my gosh. Let's talk a little bit about it though. MP Jackson, this is your turf that we're in. Is this a priority for your constituents? And of course, we're going to tie it back to
the municipality that is in place now was not devised by the PNP who was in government. It was the people of Portmore, through extensive consultation, came up with what is there. What we as a PNP government did was to facilitate what they wanted and what they said they wanted. They wanted a local authority that can deal with the day-to-day issues that affect their lives. It was purpose-driven. It was not tag. It was deliberate to make their lives better. What this government is doing is trying to put their name on Portmore. But a designation, we give you parish. Then you ask, the people ask, oh, what difference is going to make in our life? Right. Oh, that's not important, but you're now a parish. How can we govern a country today in that kind of approach? So we have used the human resource time of the Solicitor General's Department, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Local Government, all the agencies of government to put a tag on an area while they're putting a tag on communities. Other countries in the Caribbean are making republics.
Yeah.
And we are putting tags.
I just want to make one point.
Space.
Yeah, we're going to hear from both of you. Let me hear what you think on it.
Portmore is unique because it is a city municipality. It is the only city municipality in Jamaica. And that is a legal status that is given to it under the Local Governance Act. And it arose out of a consultative process where they helped to design the local authority system that they wanted for their municipality. It includes the right for the electors in Portmore to directly elect their mayor. They're the only area of Jamaica that directly elects their mayor. In all the parishes, the mayors are chosen by the councillors. It's like an electoral college. This is a specific benefit that Portmore has, and by moving to a parish, that benefit will be lost, and they will become like any other parish in that regard. And I don't think that a right like that should be taken away from the people of Portmore without a referendum on what they want. They should be the ones to make the decision. If they want to move to a parish, so be it. Nothing has been shown to us so far to indicate that there are any benefits that flow from that. There are all sorts of things that are missing. What is missing? There's no courthouse. You can't have a parish without a court because the jurisdiction to hear cases in a parish is with the parish court. Yeah. There's no hospital. There's no market. There's no cemetery. There are also provisions which St. Catherine is the parish which provides those things. If you remove them from St. Catherine, without those things, they're going to be diminished. So this is not something that can be rushed, but the people must be consulted, and their voices must be heard. They must make the decision, not a few politicians who see a political advantage, which is really what this is about.
I want to talk about the motivation. The JLP about 3 years ago came to the ECJ with proposals for boundary changes because they wanted to desegregate Portmore from St. Catherine. The reason is they believe it is to their political advantage if the Portmore seats are not counted in the St. Catherine Parish Council. When they came to the ECJ, that proposal was rejected by the ECJ. It was immediately after that they determined they needed to find another way to desegregate Portmore from St. Catherine, which is why this whole proposal about making Portmore a parish was put on the table.
Pure politics.
Pure politics. So they have said publicly that they are going to ensure it achieves parish status before the next local government election, because they believe they will now have a better chance of holding the St. Catherine Parish Council without the Portmore divisions. And that is solely what all of this is about. Nothing more.
But even that is political short-sightedness, you know. The PNP controls the St. Catherine Parish Council now. But the truth be told, we have lost control of it with the same arrangement we have in place. The chairman of the committee that just concluded the parish proposal was the mayor of Spanish Town, while Portmore was a part of St. Catherine. So it's very short-sighted and myopic of them. And it's very unfortunate. And quite frankly, it's depressing that in this day and age, that is the level of political leadership that we are being subjected to.
Well, let's hear from the people from Portmore. Let's hear what they have to say about whether or not Portmore should become a parish.
Yes, we have to grow, and they're putting forward that we should be a parish. We are moving at promises only by the government of Jamaica. You want to push for us to become a parish when there are several amenities that the municipality lacks. Presently, we don't have a local board of health. We don't have an examination depot. We don't have a hospital. We don't have a market. We don't have a cemetery. We don't know where is the border of Portmore as it stands, where Portmore stops.
It's a good idea, not bad at all.
I don't think Portmore is ready to become the 15th parish.
What I do about nothing. I mean, I don't think this is the time for it. I don't think it's necessary right now.
You need a hospital, you need a market, you need a cemetery.
It is clear that it's just a political move that they are making. And that is why I feel bad about it. There's nothing new that is going to come. There's no benefit from naming a parish. It's just a name. Just a name. You're not going to get any more money. You're not going to get nothing at all. When you look at St. Thomas, St. Mary, Hanover, all those parishes, right, it is based on the amount of roads that they have. And their PR funding, right, the Parochial Revenue Fund, right, is minuscule.
All right. I mean, you heard from the people themselves, right? Sharing some of the views that we have, you know, just kind of laid out here. So, I mean, this has been very enlightening, gentlemen. We're going to take some questions. A lot of questions are coming in, and then we will wrap for this afternoon. All right. So, Beresford Enriquez on Facebook says there needs to be less duties and hassle for Jamaicans abroad to bring or send farming equipment to Jamaica. Successive Jamaican governments have been too greedy and bad-minded against Jamaicans in the diaspora. You all want us to only give, but not to want anything in return for our efforts. It's okay for IMF, World Bank, Chinese, etc., but not for us. Shame. That's a comment there from Beresford Henriquez. We have a question here from Sailor V, Ingenious Random, and this is coming from Twitter. Sir Samuda stated that the original bill was flawed. Were there any submissions or revisions provided by JLP parliamentarians to address the shortcomings or highlight key areas of revision at any time during or after the presentation of the bill?
No, that's a very, very good question. Very good question. When the bill was in the draft stage, I hand-delivered a copy to the Attorney General at the time. I hand-delivered a copy to Minister Shaw at the time. I hand-delivered a copy to Minister Truck, Minister of Justice, to say, look, review this draft and make any adjustment, suggest any adjustment you wish to make. Absolutely none. To Mr. Carl Samuda's credit, he directed the Consumer Protection Agency that was under his portfolio to look at it and make recommendations. They made some recommendations which were incorporated in it. But for anyone who understands the parliamentary process, once you table a bill, you can, when it goes to committee stage, you can seek to have amendment to any of the provision. As I speak this moment, not one member has pointed out one line or clause in that bill that they say is egregious, wrong, and ought not to be there. Not one of them, including the person who made the remark.
Yeah. I mean, we quite frequently, in the passage of legislation through Parliament, make amendments to it. I mean, there are sometimes hundreds of amendments if it's a poorly conceived bill. They didn't come with one specific point that they wanted to change or improve in the bill. They just said it's flawed, which of course was an empty slogan, because if it was flawed, then they should have pointed out this clause needs to be deleted or amended, and this is what we're proposing. Nothing like that. Oh, they just said it's flawed and we're voting against it.
And by the way, I'll add to that. The Solicitor General's chamber vetted the bill. The Chief Parliamentary Council assisted in the drafting of the bill, in the review of the draft, so that it conforms with all of the legal provisions, constitutionally and otherwise. So the gentleman, with all due respect, who made the remark, I think he must speak to his peers.
Well, I hope, Selavi, that answers your question this afternoon. Let's go back over to Facebook. We're hearing from Deanly Idrisiki. The question is, couldn't the government set a plan to increase minimum wage annually?
Absolutely.
That's the point, Julian.
I mean, that is a question of law. You need to just put a provision in the law that says that once the minimum wage has been trued up to the current cost of living, and you set it at a living wage, then the annual adjustments are done by reference to either the CPI, which is a consumer price index that Statin calculates, or some subset of that which focuses on the actual consumption patterns of persons who are earning the minimum wage. So you have a more accurate reflection of what the adjustment should be to keep them at the level that they were, given that prices were moving. It can be done, easy. And it is a straightforward concept. It just needs to be drafted and implemented, and it can become law.
But partly it requires the will.
It requires a will.
And the conscience.
And the conscience. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's take our final question here from Everton S. Jackson, and it has to do with learning loss. Learning loss will definitely be an issue down the road. How does the PNP plan on pressing the government to take mitigation steps to prevent this coming catastrophe? And while it's not in direct relation to cost of living, we can...
Yeah, well, we will be speaking to it.
I had asked the Minister of Education at Standing Finance Committee what was the status of the diagnostic tests. I mean, she indicated that diagnostic tests have been done for all schools, but in checks with some of my principals,
they haven't heard anything.
Been done for all schools. The implementation of the remedial programs, again, she had indicated that that is on track. But again, in discussions that I've had with principals, it is not. Now, this is something that you have to do no. They estimated that 120,000 students could not be accounted for, right, during the term. They said they have found 40,000 of them. You have another set of students who, even though they were online, they learned nothing. So it's a matter of urgency. You are bringing back students into 2 forms up when they probably have learned nothing. Nothing whatsoever. And I don't believe that the existing resources can deal with it. A teacher who has a class can't deal with the remedial for the students in the class. It's just too much. So you're going to have to take on additional resources and you have to deal with the problem now. Because you can't wait 6 months. You can't wait a year for kids who have lost 2 years of school. And I don't sense the urgency on the part of the government.
Not at all.
I don't sense that there's a proper plan put in place.
Correct.
And when I talk to the principals, there's a disconnect between what the ministry is saying and the reality in the schools.
I would have thought that there would have been a clear program for addressing this issue, highlighting what are the things that need to be done and how you're going to get it done. I'm not sure within the Ministry of Education they have the capacity to drive that program, quite frankly. I think that they need some supplementary support of some kind around that. But we're not seeing that, and there's nothing in the budget that is supporting that either. So the fact of the matter is that the government is ignoring the problem and moving on, but it's a huge problem that cannot be ignored. So in terms of what we will be doing, it's just our role is one of advocacy. So we will be speaking as we're speaking about it today. We'll be speaking about it every opportunity we get. And we ask the citizens of the country to also make noise about it, because the one thing you can rely on is that governments do respond to political pressures. And political pressures means the voice of the people. So we need to be out there articulating. We want to see a response to this crisis. We want to see a response to protect our country and to protect our students who have suffered this massive learning loss and get them back on track. And the Patterson report identifies it, quantifies it, and says this is what needs to be spent to do it. So that, it's not like you're not starting from zero. The work has been done.
But there's a pattern of just kicking the can down the road, to pacify persons now, like the banking fee thing. Prime Minister come and make an announcement, and they do nothing. They don't specify anything concrete, like in the learning loss issue, anything specific, and do it. Truth be told, call it cynical. When they come to Parliament, they say all the right things, and nothing happens after. That's the sad part about it.
Well, gentlemen, we have to wrap. There's so much more that we could sit here and reason about. And MP Jackson and MP Robinson, thank you so much for joining us here on Sunday Reasonings with Mark, and thank you so much, Sir Golding, for for just, conceptualizing this and giving us an opportunity to have these discussions and engage our audience who wants to speak with you and wants to speak with our members here. Any final words, Sir Golding, before we wrap?
Well, I just want to use this opportunity to thank you, Rasheen, for moderating this series. I think you're doing an excellent job. And I want to thank the production crew for all they are doing to bring it to the people who are tuning in and listening. And I want to thank my colleagues, my senior Member of Parliament colleague, Fitz Jackson, who, is an experienced man in this thing and has, years of knowledge under his belt and has a love for the people. And he's not the kind of person who plays politics with critical issues. He just wants to see progress and he wants to see a better life for Jamaicans. And I hope he will get the support from the public that he deserves with this banking fee thing. And my colleague Julian, who's our finance spokesman, he is on top of his portfolio, and I want to thank him for all of the information that he's brought to this Sunday Reasoning this evening and shared with our audience. So thank you very much for coming and listening. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I look forward to you attending the next one, which we will announce in due course.
Thank you, Sir Golding. And to your viewers, thank you so much for sticking and staying and joining us. Until we meet again the last Sunday in, when is the next month? April? The last Sunday in April. Be well and walk good. All right, so next week, next Sunday, the last Sunday in the next month, right?
Because the one for February is being
that
is
at
the beginning of March.
Now,
so in terms of when we set the next date, I'll discuss it with our team. And,
right.
Once the budget is
good to do a post-budget one.
Yeah.
Immediately after the budget debate is finished.
Sure.
I think we should do one.
But the point is, we will be here again on another Sunday to reason with Mr. Golding and some more sharp minds in the People's National Party. Thank you so much for joining us. Until then, be well. Bye-bye.
Yeah. All the people, them, listen again, yeah. Calling our comrades in this moment, it's time to raise your hand. And may we continue to put in the work and improve Jamaica land. From 1938, we are lead the way and that never change. And today the strong foundation from way back when remains. We're moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The People's Party working non-stop. Fi put fi we country back on top. We're moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The People's Party working non-stop. Fi put fi we country back on top. Cause PNP strong. Yes, we're strong. PNP strong. So come make we make Jamaica strong. Cause BNP strong. So come make we make Jamaica better. For the people, after all, we are the People's Party. From way back when in the days of Norman and Michael Manley. And then PJ take over and pass it to Sister P. And then she pass it to Peter P. No more gold in the box. BNP at top of the class. We moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The People's Party working non-stop. Fi put fi we country back on top. We moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The People's Party working non-stop. Fi put fi we country back on top. Cause PNP strong. Yes, we're strong. Cause PNP strong. PNP strong. Yes, we're strong. So come make we make Jamaica strong. Yes, we're strong. PNP strong. Cause PNP strong. Yes, we're strong. Yes, we're strong. Yeah. All the people, them, listen again, yeah. Calling our comrades in this moment, it's time to raise your hand. And may we continue to put in the work and improve Jamaica land. From 1938, we are lead the way and that never change. And today the strong foundation from way back when remains. We're moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The People's Party working non-stop. Fi put fi we country back on top. We're moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The People's Party working non-stop. Fi put fi we country back on top. Cause PNP strong. Yes, we're strong. PNP strong. Yes, we're strong. So come make we make Jamaica strong. Yes, we're strong. Cause BNP strong. Yes, we're strong. So come make we make Jamaica better. For the people, after all, we are the people's party. From way back when in the days of Norman and Michael Manley. And then PJ take over and pass it to Sister P. And then she pass it to Peter P. No more gold in the box. BNP at top of the class. We moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The people's party working non-stop. Fi put fi country back on top. We moving forward, we not turn back. Building Jamaica, yes, block by block. The people's party working non-stop. Fi put fi we country back on top. Cause BNP strong. Yes, we strong. Cause BNP strong. BNP strong. Yes, we strong. So come make we make Jamaica strong.